we have been lied to. Guitar companies have told us that they could not make this guitar, and so this guitar is a lie. To a place. I have the hardest time making a case that you should spend more than $1,000 on an electric guitar. I think that there's so many variables, they lack the purity of acoustic guitars, and I'm okay starting that fight. I think that most of the time you are much better served buying an affordable guitar in your price range and then just making it yourself. And so that's why I was both excited and skeptical when these came out. So this is one of the brand new PRS. This is a McCarty. This is the 594. It's called the 594 because it's 24.594 inches. And so this is kind of a magical shorter scale length humbucker guitar. And I will say the first thing, it's magical, it's under $1,000, and it makes very little sense for me for you to spend that much money above this. So I'm Jeremy, this is Guitar Hunter. Make sure you're subscribed if you're interested in content like this. I try to give an honest take on guitars and gear as just a guitar nerd, as a very normal guitar player, and the world needs ordinary guitar players. I'm glad you're here with me. I'm not a fancy guitar player, and I just go for guitars that make my life fun and enjoyable, make me a better musician. And so this one is definitely worth talking about. So with all of that said, let's get in. This is a 3-question gear review. If you're new to the channel, the 3 questions that I ask when I get guitars and gear like this is, number 1, what is good about this thing? Is it exciting? Is it great? Is it wonderful? What are all of the things that would just make your heart go pitter-patter as you get this guitar? Number 2, what's wrong with this guitar? What's bad about this guitar? Because every single guitar, all the way up, the most expensive guitar, every guitar has compromise. There are things that you just wish were a little better or a little different or you would have done differently. And so I understand that this guitar is aimed at a lot of people, and I'm probably not even their target audience of who's after this guitar. But let's talk about what things are not good about this guitar. The third question that we always talk about is, hey, if you're in the market, a guitar nerd like me, would I recommend it? Do I think you should buy it? So with all of that said, let's get into it. This is a Paul Reed Smith. Now this is an SE. This is made in Indonesia, and it tells you on the back of the headstock. It says made by Cortec, built by Cortec Musical Instrument Company Limited, Ltd, Indonesia, under license for PRS guitars, and then it has the serial number, and it has some other stickers on the back. So, number one, I think it's fair to say that this is not necessarily a Paul Reed Smith guitar. This is a guitar that was made off of a spec sheet with Asian production. Now, other guitar companies do this. We can't be upset about this. This has been happening for 40 or 50 years. Most reasonably and noticeably, like D'Angelico is made in the same plant, and on the back of the headstocks say the same thing. Now, with all that said, Paul Reed Smith is meticulously detail-oriented, and I now work for a PRS dealer, and as I've seen what goes into making these guitars, I don't want to be hard on them. I think that this is a guitar that it's kind of unrivaled as far as quality and all of the fit and features. So let's talk about the good things. The good things about this guitar, as I have had this and played this for a few weeks, this guitar has a big old chunky wonderful neck, and it has two magical humbuckers that give me lots of tones that are not too spicy. They're not hot pickups. So let's talk about it. Big fat taper on the neck, kind of reminiscent of a 59 Les Paul. If you like that big C-shaped, U-shaped neck, this thing makes you feel right at home. I've been really interested in the Bonnie Pink, the SEs from last year, and I still want to get one of those, but the necks are a little skinnier on those, and the pickups are a little too spicy for me on those. So with this, it's a big, comfortable neck, especially if you're like me. I'm 60% acoustic guitar, maybe 70%, but I tell people that want to send me guitars. Anyway, I'm about 60% acoustic guitars, and I'm about 40% electric guitars. I own plenty of electric guitars. I probably own 15 or so electric guitars, but for me, this neck is really comfortable as I'm coming from being an acoustic guitar player that likes to play electric guitars. Now, with this, the humbuckers are exceptionally wonderful, and the finish and the hardware. Let's talk about the humbuckers. These are the PRS, these are the 8515S. Now, these are the S version. These are imports, they're made overseas. They are not the same as the core, but they are in theory very similar in specs. And man, they're very mellow and fun. They're not, like I said, they're not too spicy. And when I say spicy, they're not gonna overdrive an amp. Now, it's still, you know, this is like a high-powered Telecaster is how this guitar sounds to me. But with that, it's still, by the time I have, you know, a deluxe reverb right at 5 or 6, like straight up and down, I took all the number knobs off of my amp, and now I have to convert to like time. Anyway, by the time you get this to halfway, it's pretty overdriven, but this guitar is incredibly touch sensitive. What I really love is how much clarity you maintain. I haven't looked, but I'm assuming there are likely treble bleeds in this because it's an incredibly usable guitar. The controls, let's shift from the pickups to the controls. Well, last thoughts on the pickups. The pickups are really good output. I think they're in the 7s, so they're not very hot. They're a vintage spec, so you pair that with like a 59, kind of a big Les Paul neck. You kind of pair it with really sweet, mellow pickups, and you put those pickups, kind of a high-power Telecaster, like a bitey thing, and a rock and roll thing, and a metal thing, but it still comes out to being a guitar that's really fun to use. Now, all of that, you tame it with the controls, and there are a couple notable things about the controls. You have a volume and a tone. It's the same format as a Les Paul. Sometimes, other PRSs, they have a linear thing, where you'd have, like, bridge pickup and bridge volume this way. Anyway, if you know, you know, and it's annoying, and then it breaks your gate, and then you have to figure it out, and then you come back a couple weeks later, and then you play a different guitar, and you forget, and then you turn your tone down. Anyway, the big thing for me with this is that you have 2 volumes, 2 tones, and then you have coil taps. So you have these little, oh man, so satisfying. I will say, these are a little hard to pull up. But with that, you have really great even volume that you can turn down and get it to really clean up. And then the next stage of this is that when you have the coil taps up, you get the spanky kind of wonderful sounds. Now, truth be told, I don't use the coil taps. I want a humbucker to sound like a humbucker. I don't necessarily want it to sound like a strange single coil. So for me, that's the feature I use the least on this guitar. Now one of the last things we have to talk about as far as quality is the hardware on this. Now, if you don't know, there's generally speaking, well, let's call it 4 tiers, but let's call it, there's between 3 and 4 tiers of PRS guitars. I think there's technically like 6. But most generally speaking, there is the SE line, which is the import and affordable line, and this is by far the most value in my opinion. Then you have the S2, which are American-made guitars, and so they also make a version of this guitar in the S2, and then you have the third tier, which would be a core. And so you have these kind of 3 tiers. Now the 4th tier could be, you get into like the 10 top stuff, you get into the custom shop stuff, but also there are bolt-on versions that are somewhat more affordable. So you could split those into bolt-on and core, but anyway, general 3 tiers. Now what's so interesting to me, and this is where I feel like we have been lied to, guitar companies have told us that they could not make this guitar, and so this guitar is a lie. For 20 years they've told us that you cannot get this guitar at this spec, with these finishes, with these materials. You just have to suck it up and you have to spend $2,500 on that Les Paul. And it's really, really shocking to me that this guitar is all of the things that brands told us that we could not do. And so I'm so excited about this guitar, but I'm also angry, annoyed, perturbed, confused. And so it does feel like there was some planned obsolescence, or whatever the opposite. It's not planned obsolescence, but there's a component to this guitar that is so much better than what they told us they could have done years ago. And so let's just say that it's a gift. It's a benefit to all of us. It's great that the world is now giving us this quality of guitar in a much lower price point. Now, with all of that said, I think that this guitar is absolutely incredible. I love the hardware. The hardware here is the same as the S2 and the core. You can buy the pickups you can buy them from like our Hometown Music, the shop that I work in. Hometown Music is going to sell these pickups, so you could upgrade this to a core. I've seen another video of people upgrading Paul Reed Smith SEs into cores, and you can do it. I mean, it's the parts caster world. It's the same amount of variables that have always been complicated with electric guitars, and why I don't think guitars are worth much more than electric guitars are worth much more than $1,000. But this thing is unbelievable amounts of value for what it is. Now, it's not perfect. My main issue and complaint with this guitar is the finish. It's a bit cheesy. It's thick polyurethane. It feels like it's plasticky. If I had to pick the number one thing I don't like about this guitar, it's 2 things. It's the coil taps. I think they're gimmicky. I don't like coil taps. I don't get it. I'm glad they're here. It's a good differentiator. It's a cool specky thing. It moves guitars. If you're familiar with Guitar Hunter, the Guitar Hunter framework, as I've talked about, and I taught in my class, Write Guitars Faster, I kind of visualize my guitar tones between like very specific tones and very diverse tones, and then I kind of move out between bright tones and dark tones. And so with this, having the coil taps is a huge benefit because it allows you to really move into the diverse. Like, you can cover a lot of ground. I think that this guitar really is wonderful as far as the amount of features and things that it packs in. But I think it's a bit gimmicky. So between the finish and that, I think that there's minimal compromise. Okay, here's the thing. Oh man, here's one of my things that I've thought about over the last couple weeks with this guitar. If you love humbucker guitars, chances are you're looking at a Gibson or a Les Paul, Les Paul, SG, a 335, one of those. Chances are if you're looking at that guitar, you're like, oh my gosh, I want one of those. And then you go and you're like, what is the guitar that my favorite guitar player plays? And then you look at it and you're like, oh, it's a Gibson and it's a Les Paul and it's big humbuckers and it's a big carved top. And then you see the price tag and you're like, oh my gosh, it's $3,500 or it's $5,000 for a custom shop, or it's, even if it's $1,800, $2,000, to get Gibson on the headstock and a guitar that sounds and plays and looks even close to your hero, you're going to either have to cough up a lot of cash, or you are going to have to compromise on the thing that made you like it. The headstock, the name on the headstock, you will then have to get an Epiphone. So there is just compounding so much compromise by the time you would talk yourself into buying, you know, an Inspired by Gibson Les Paul, which I've had one of those. I really liked it. I reviewed it. I think it's a really fun guitar, but to me it did feel, that guitar, I ended up not liking the finish, and I thought it was cheesy, and I feel like there's so much compromise just in getting the headstock, and you're still paying $1,000. So, other options. If you're looking at Paul Reed Smith guitars and you see your hero. Now, there's a bunch of Paul Reed Smith musicians that I don't necessarily... Oh, who am I kidding? I love Mark Tremonti. I loved Creed. Very quick side story. In 6th grade, people in my middle school were starting to be cool. And they were starting to find bands that they were into. And they would wear shirts from those bands. And they would wear other clothing. And they would start playing guitar like those bands. All of my friends chose Blink-182. And I chose Creed, and you know, it's always been a bit of a thing. But I love Mark Tremonti. I think he's amazing. He's an incredible guitar player, and the thing that I absolutely adore and appreciate about how he plays guitar, and Paul Reed Smith, let's come back to Paul Reed Smith. I love the fact that I can look at my hero's guitar, I can look at Mark Tremonti's guitar, and I can say, oh man, it says Paul Reed Smith on the headstock, has bird inlays on the fingerboard, has brass inserts on the bridge, has 8515 pickups, has coil taps, has a beautiful, really well-matched flame top, and then everything about it. I love that you can get that. He plays a $5,000 version, and you can play an $800 version. Bada bing, bada boom. I think that there is so little compromise in Paul Reed Smith. They hold themselves to an incredible standard. So I know I'm still technically in the what's wrong with this. Let's get back to what's wrong with this. It's not perfect. The finish is cheesy, and the coil taps are a bit gimmicky, and it has some blemishes. It has things in the finish that just aren't right. The biggest thing for me, man, is there are little specks under the finish on this side, and I'll have to get the macro lens and show you in a second shot. I keep thinking there's dirt on this guitar. I keep trying to scratch it off. In the binding, there are 1, 2, 3 little black dots that are just included in the finish, and I cannot get them to go away, and they absolutely, yeah, it's not perfect. I wouldn't expect it to be perfect at this guitar, made by, in this part of the world, made at this price point, made with this kind of finish. I can't expect it to be perfect, but it's unfortunate that it is literally where my left hand watches while I'm playing guitar. Other than that, the fit and finish really is remarkable on these guitars. The general quality is definitely there. I like the tuners here, especially like, as you can see, these kind of cream colored tuners, and the nut is the same material as the S2. And so this guitar, I mean, I don't see a reason why someone would buy an S2 right now. I don't get it. Yeah, I mean, country of origin matters, but it continues to matter less for guitars. I mean, Paul Reed Smith, the standards by which they have chosen to import guitars has risen the expectations of import guitars to a level that even themselves, they can't quite match it. Like, you got no pore fill on finishes, you got different finishes, you got kind of seemingly rougher carves, and so to me this one is a complete no-brainer. So with all of that said, we've now arrived at the final part of this review, which is if you're in the market, should you get it? And I will say wholeheartedly 100% there is no rival. Epiphone is not even in the same universe in my mind, and I've played so many Epiphones. And so if you're looking for a humbucker guitar, now it is not without caveat and nuance and certain considerations that you should have in your mind. But this guitar, if you're looking for a humbucker guitar that can cover a ton of tones, that's really comfortable to play, that has incredible resale value, go look at the value of PRS SEs used. They lose minimal. Usually, like, break your own heart and go look at how much an Epiphone sells for new, and then look at one that's 2 years old, and you're going to see those suckers are losing 60% of their value, and then people are having to basically give them away. The Paul Reed Smith gig bags are awesome. They have a hanger that hangs in the back, and you can hang it in a closet. So for mine, since this guitar has been near and dear to my heart, it has been hanging in my closet, and I'll play it with my little Mustang Micro, my headphone amp. So, long review, but this thing is thoroughly wonderful. And not perfect. I would give this a solid B+. And I'm also very, 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 very hard on electric guitars because I think the finishes are usually cheesy. If I had to pick, that's almost always my issue, is when they're thick, really plasticky finishes and when just the hardware feels like a compromise. But man, this guitar is no compromise and I don't understand it. I do feel upset that I was lied to by big brands saying like, sorry, you got to spend $2,500, $3,500 if you're going to get a humbucker guitar with good maple. I think that, well, they were lying to us. Now they're telling us the truth. And the truth is really solid, really good guitar. And I'm still on a quest. I'm on a mission for a humbucker guitar. So thanks for watching. I'm Jeremy. This is Guitar Hunter. Make sure you're subscribed. And what do you think of the new studio? This is the first video with my new lighting rig. So I got these lights set up here. And I like it a lot. And I messed up my shot. But anyway, thanks for watching. Go fill the world with music and friendship. Bada bing, bada boom. Hasta luego.